Welcome back to the Odd Ones podcast. Today we are going to be talking about the 5 love languages and reading some notes that I made. Let me take this off because it's going to rattle. I forgot to do that last
What I
time.
really wanted to do
Mhm.
in my mind the whole time I was thinking as you were coming in here was find some kind of intro, like whose line is it anyway, where they're like, welcome back to the show where everything is made up and the points don't matter. Like, and then whatever.
Get
But you
into
can't
it.
take somebody else's stuff, but
Yeah,
we
I
gotta,
mean, you can, but that's called plagiarism.
yeah. And I like being a free woman.
So let's talk about the 5 love languages before we get into the notes. By the way, the
5 love languages.
the notes are from things that I wrote. She's going to read them off, and then we're going to discuss them.
Circa 2020 something.
Huh?
I don't know when you wrote these.
24? What is this here?
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's probably like April.
When you get old, no, it was before April.
Oh,
When you get old, like you never know when things happen. It all blends together.
Yep. So
COVID, that's what
for
did it.
me, where the journey with 5 love languages started
That's the
was
book we're covering right now, right?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Because
right.
in the original podcast, point 5, episode point 5, we talked about the Us Journal, which we are going to talk about.
Yeah, this is the Us Journal. This is only going to be for TikToks and shorts. That's what we talked about then.
Most of it. Some of it is stuff that,
Only for
you know,
Patreon.
Yeah, that.
Because it's too spicy. So what was I saying? Oh, so how the journey started for me, and Lara can tell you her version of where she got it from, was actually we were not together at the time. We were still with our exes, and they gave. Actually, my first time was we were going to church, and
Not
they,
us.
yeah, me and Juliet's mom were going to church, and we were trying to get counseling, and they gave us 5 love languages, and I was like, this is literally bullcrap. I'm not reading this. And then I met you and your ex, and
I feel like that does not do you justice, though, because at the time, based on what I understand, you were actually trying, but the way you just said it makes you sound like a complete butthole.
I'm just trying to fast forward this story.
I'm
to-
defending him, just so you
I
know.
appreciate
Go
it.
ahead.
Yeah, I mean, really, we did the questionnaire, but we never really invested the time into reading it. So that was the actual first experience. How that actually went was we didn't invest the time in the relationship. We didn't invest the time into reading the book or going to that class. We only went like 3 or 4 times. But whenever we met you and met your ex was whenever I sat down and started kind of reading it. And going over it, and literally I was just like 5 love languages. Like I did the quiz, and I just did not give it the time of day. Granted, at that time I was already in my mind, essentially, to quote other podcasts, we were in the roommate phase of the relationship. So whenever you get there, it's kind of really hard to get out, and it's neither her or my fault. But I was reading over it, and I'm like, God, like the 5 love languages. What is this? Like that is too broad of a term. Even whenever Lara and I started dating and really getting serious, we tried to go back over it, and I'm like, I think there's too much gray in there to really define the 5 love languages.
If you were in love with somebody, all of them matter.
Yeah, exactly. Is what I used to say.
I'm not mocking you.
It was pretty stupid.
It does sound that way, though.
But in preparation for our podcast and listening to other people talk about it, I was like, let me give this another go. And this time, since then, I've discovered audiobooks. I didn't know about them. I didn't know that they were going to be such a help for me. I'm dyslexic, so reading is a real challenge. I really have to sit down, focus, have nothing on, really be by myself and be able to focus on a book if I'm reading it reading a physical book, where audiobooks just have changed my life. So I sat down, listened to it. Who's this by again? It's something Chapman.
Gary
Chapman. Took Lara and I over the course of our relationship.
Dr. Gary Chapman. I feel like he earned that title, and I should probably say it.
He's changed enough lives for sure. But Lara and I both have taken the quiz. I think I need to
I
go back
love
and
the fact though that we're going back over this now because when we originally filmed this, and I probably would behoove us to do the quiz
yeah,
again.
that's exactly what I was about to say. Is I probably need to
Well, I
retake
stole
it.
your thunder,
You
so
sure did.
there we are.
Thanks, Thor.
Yeah, I do what I can.
But anyway,
I wish I
so
could have grabbed a hammer and just,
dang, oh, there's one right above your head.
yeah, I will not grab anything heavy above my head.
Um, so yeah, I think it would be good if we went back over the quiz again. I think I'm still pretty firm in where I was at, but better safe than sorry.
Do you want me to share my exposure to it
Yeah,
before we
one
get
second.
into it?
So I went
I
back
still
over.
got the thunder in my
Yeah,
hand
you do.
full.
You're sitting there, lightning. Um, so I went back over the book and pretty much life changing, life altering at least, and how I can communicate with Lara, and just the content's really good. It really, really is good, and we'll like I said, we will be going over each chapter in detail in this podcast. Your turn.
I want to grab a lightning bolt.
Oh, wait,
We were talking about thunder the whole time. I don't really know how you would grab thunder, but they
and
go
we're in
together.
the middle of about to start a hurricane.
Oh, that's true. Second one in the last 2 weeks?
I mean, granted,
We live in Florida.
yeah.
It would not be hard to deduce that based on 2 hurricanes and, you know, whatever,
Yeah.
if you were really that interested.
Now, a little side tangent about hurricanes, real quick. The reality did hit that two really isn't that much if you think back in 2004 whenever we had like 8,000 of them. So anyway, that's all I wanted to add there.
That was a very short tangent.
Yeah.
So much like Bjorn here, I previously married and found the Five Love Languages book. I found it immensely helpful because, especially like, I think if you come at it, whether you're in the roommate stage or whether I don't know, I take all books and I'm like, even if this doesn't apply to me specifically, what can I take away from it? And that might not at the time have been the mindset, but in reading it, it made a lot of sense. And since I had first read it, I have come a long way in understanding myself. Therefore, it makes this all the more enriching. But I'd started it in my first relationship or my first marriage. And at the time, I have 3 kids. He has 1. He is much braver than any man.
He being me.
Yeah, pointing, but the book is over there. And anyway,
there's a lot of pointing at it.
Yes, I'm a handsy person. I'm going to try and be better about that. Anyway, when I first read it, it made a lot of sense, especially having kids and understanding like. One of my children is very words of affirmation, physical touch, where growing up for me, physical touch was a hard thing. Even though I was a very physical touch child, life things, and we'll talk about that as the book unfolds, but had used that and gained a lot of knowledge, but had not applied it in the way that it should have been applied. So you can read something. I think we often get content from somewhere, whether it be a TikTok or like I watched a TikTok the other day, squirrel, about you can reuse zip ties.
Mm-hmm.
What? I don't know how much money I've spent on zip ties, but I'm going to go to use a zip tie in probably 2 months from now. And then I'm going to completely forget that I know how to reuse a zip tie, and I'm going to, whatever. So much like that, the 5 love languages, I understood.
All about seasons. Just touching on what you're talking about right now. If you watch a Matrix whenever you're 19 and then you watch it again whenever you're 30, and you're in that kind of work environment and things like that, much like the main character of the Matrix, Neo. I don't know what his Anderson.
Because that was important.
Yeah, it was important to me. But
that sounded so sarcastic, but
anyway,
go on.
Your embarrassment is showing.
I know.
Anyway, so
we poke fun at each other, and that's okay.
Whenever you're 19 and you're watching Matrix, the fight scenes might be the cool thing, the slow-mo, all this different stuff, the red pill versus blue pill. But then whenever you're older, you're like, Am I actually going? Are we actually in the Matrix? If I am I going to take the red pill or the blue pill? Am I going to enjoy the steak, or am I going to go and fight the battle? You know, which one do you really want to do? So it's all about seasons. Like you reading that book and me reading this book. At 19 or however old I was and however old you were whenever you read it for the first time, and where we were at in that previous relationship and where we're at mentally and with the kids and everything like that, versus now whenever we read it and we're like, oh shoot, okay, these are the things that we can take away. You can take away things back then, but even compared to now, the takeaways that you had might be different from what you perceive them as now.
Right. Well, same thing that we talked about in our first episode with the book itself, or the other book, the Us Journal, is that your brain
We have
changes.
to get them as a sponsor at this point.
Right. That you change. I feel like there's a core of who you are. Like there are some things that you just like, I'm not ever going to, unless I get some kind of medical intervention or some kind of trauma. I mean, brain trauma would be the only thing that I could think very seriously that would change your personality,
Mhm.
right? Like just for me. Um, so when I originally got into this book, I definitely related it more to my relationship with the kids and my own perspective than I did thinking about trying to utilize it in the relationship that I was in. And had I, maybe it would have been different, and sometimes we learn things and we use them and then we just kind of toss them aside because maybe for a ton of reasons, right? And like when you and I met, and there's obviously a lot of backstory you guys will get to know, but when he was sharing some of his relationship issues, in my mind, even though I had not applied the concept of the five love languages to its fullest extent,
Mhm.
like I knew the content was valuable, and so I shared that book with you
Mhm.
because I thought, because I really did at the time, like, want you. I think primarily I wanted you and Juliet's mom to be happy.
Yeah.
And I was never thinking about at the time. We worked together, we were friends. He was always very respectful. Like it was always he and his wife, and then me and my ex-husband. He never crossed any boundaries. Like, we just genuinely cared about one another.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be important to get to male female relationships,
Yeah, we'll get into that later.
but
Not in this
nonetheless,
book in
um,
general.
I really wanted them to succeed. And in my heart, I knew that what was in this book was important. And I knew that when you go into a relationship with someone, understanding how they love and how they receive love is important. Like, my grandmother, for example, uh, less her limitations physically, like where she's at in her age, my whole life has always expressed her love by giving me things,
Mhm.
whatever that is. And
Mhm.
so I knew that, like, that's her way of expressing love to me. And so I always felt like you and Juliet's mom.
By the way, let me talk on that real quick. Um, we're not just saying baby mama or anything like that here. We're not bringing up our previous relationships names out of respect for them. Just if they wanna, like, if they come to us after watching one of these and they're like, oh no, that's fine, sure, we'll say their names, but um
Just respect.
yeah, just out of respect, we're not really planning on talking about the whole exes and stuff like that dynamic. We might make a whole video about that, but don't really want to bring that up too much. But whenever we do, out of respect, we have my ex and your ex. You don't have to
Right.
keep on saying Juliet's mom.
I don't know. Acting that way. I will not
That's because I
remember
said it
that. So
first.
yeah. Anyway, conceptually speaking, I just wanted the two of you to be happy. So
Yeah.
in my mind, even though I wasn't exercising this book, and maybe at some point, we had tried, but I wanted you to get from this book the same thing that I felt like the full potential, right? So fast forward, here we are in our relationship, and I can't quote, but I will give you the concept that book is bullyak, and it's stupid. And if you love somebody, all of those languages are unlocked, is what you felt. And that kind of, at the time when we talked about it, because we very quickly moved from friends to dating to like we were in it. We were in it, raising a blended family, living together, and then got married because we felt like we needed to do that. I felt like if you felt that way about a book that to me was so insightful and could give you insight into me, I did feel really disheartened. I don't think we've ever talked about this. I wanted you to understand, like, this is how I'm wired. I know from our experience together that outside of the puppy dog stage, when everything settles in, like, you are not wired the same way I am. So it was almost a shock to me when you had started really focusing on the podcast. You had been listening to other podcasts, and you came back and you were like, I'm reading the 5 love languages. And I kind of knew, like, you were in it to be like, this is stupid. This is crap.
I literally went into this to disprove this book, and then it disproved me.
Right. And I really never had any thoughts outside of like, well, this will be an interesting conversation.
Yep.
But when you did come back, and I realized like it hit home, even if one nugget came away from it, it hit home for you. That was super, super encouraging to me. And then when we talked about, using this for podcast content, I was like, oh, okay, like this could really go somewhere.
Yep.
So to jump into that, I have gone back through the book. We have taken the quiz. Mind you, the quiz was, probably a year or so ago that we took it. We have talked about it. In the last 2 months, know that my perspective on some of the love languages have changed.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to go back over this, but we're going to dive into it. So there's an overview in the beginning about the love language concept in general, but I'm going to give you guys the 5 love languages, and crash course. So the concept is that, per Dr. Chapman, there are 5 preliminary ways, and you can siphon them off however you want to, that people show love and feel love. I think that it is important to note, and, I need to review the book one more time, but that every relationship can have a different dynamic, but as romantic, which is what we're talking about. And there is one for loving your kids, but far as
one that we need to pick up and read for the podcast.
Right. But as it goes to a romantic relationship, there are 5 love languages. So there's active.
Oh, shoot. Sorry, before we get too far started into this, I did want to say that if you guys send in an email, whoever sends in the first email will get 2 copies of the 5 love languages on us. So, like I said, send in an email just saying, if you want to tell us about your great relationship, if you want to tell us about, help that y'all need in your relationship, anything.
Or I want a free book.
Yeah, or any of these different things. We will send 2 copies of the 5 love languages to you guys, because that's how much I think it can change your relationship if you actually put in the work and your spouse puts in the work as well. So
sounds like a smack. Wait till you go back to edit that.
You're gonna like that noise.
That is exactly what it sounded like.
I'm so excited about that one.
I also think that if we send them 2 books, right? Whether you're in a relationship or you're thinking about getting into one, or you're just coming out of one, it is important to read as an individual so you know yourself.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
There is something to be said that if you're in a relationship that's struggling and maybe your spouse is not gung-ho about it, that does not mean that you should not read it. That does not mean that what you learn about yourself, what you learn about people in general, you might understand without your spouse even telling you what their love language is. Don't neglect reading this book or engaging with the content just because the other person isn't engaged. Oftentimes, in a relationship that's struggling, or maybe you're looking to get into a relationship, that if you can take that first step or you can lead the way, that can do a lot.
Yep.
So, anyway. 5 love languages. So there's acts of service in no particular order, quality time, gifts, words of affirmation, and I always do this. And help me,
You said physical touch?
physical touch, which is wild that one just like bloop. So those 5 love languages, we're going to go over them. But today on our podcast, we're going to talk about the general overview. So I'm going off of notes he made, and that always sparks conversation. But the first note that he made is be bilingual in love languages. So I'll say this and I'll hand it over to you.
Mhm.
When you talk about the 5 love languages, generally, and there's a free test online, we'll leave a link below that you can take, but there's a language that you primarily speak. You may be a words of affirmation person, and so that is how you feel the most loved or give love, and maybe it's 60%. And then there's a secondary love language that you have where that comes in maybe a close second. Maybe it's not a close second. Maybe you're like really heavy on the words or whatever, it might be. And then, going on from there. So you
So just
wrote,
as an example, mine would be physical touch and quality time. So just neither, like, one is not above the other for me. Both of them are very important for me.
so like maybe it's, 40-40,
Yeah.
and then the rest go from there. For me, up until recently, words of affirmation was my like resounding primary.
Mhm.
And then and close second was acts of service and physical touch. And then quality time. And for both of us, the last one was gifts.
Yeah.
Um,
I enjoy it whenever you bring me stuff from the store or whatever, but would I prefer that? No. That is not my favorite thing in
right.
the whole world. So what that specifically is talking about is, let's pretend like you only have one language that you're speaking. So for me, it'd be quality time. So that is mine, but it is very important, and this is something that I lack in, and something that I need to practice more, and things that Lara and I have discussed is being able to speak the other person's language, like not forcing yourself, but getting into the habit of
A Duolingo, if
yeah,
you will.
yeah, exactly. Have the little owl come in. Hey, don't forget to freaking
Tell your wife she's beautiful.
yeah, don't forget that.
I like
So
his voice.
yeah, I wish I had that. That would be a lot easier on me.
Who do you think you are? I'm not telling your wife.
Yeah.
That was my owl joke.
But anyway, so yeah, be bilingual in the love languages that you can speak. So, if and that can even expand into if you have kids as well. All of them are going to be different. One person might like physical touch. All of our kids like gift giving or receiving and giving gifts.
Not as a primary, though.
Yeah, well, depends on who you're talking to, but so that means Lara and I, you're great at giving gifts. I'm terrible, so I have to like put that in the forefront of my mind.
You did get
some other-
Lyrica Propel today.
I mean, she did ask.
I mean, but you
I
didn't.
don't think she ever got it out of the truck though.
No, she did. She did.
Okay, good. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for that one. It's just like make sure you train yourself in a different love language and not just the ones that you're comfortable in, which again is something that I struggle with.
On that note, again, we talked
I
about
love these chairs.
me too. I'm definitely locked in until you said I love these chairs, and I was like, dang, my hip hurts. It didn't hurt till then. But two things come to mind. Number one is it is not, especially when there's such a gap, right? So for you, yours is quality time. I have ADHD. So, and again, we've learned a lot as we've gone through this. So I didn't understand quality time, especially in the way that you spoke it. But quality time is very hard for me as a, like, just as a human, you know.
Well, let's clarify on that. So what she's speaking about specifically, do you want to tell that side of the situation?
I don't know what you're talking about. I
Okay,
was going to
so
go on a tangent.
what she's specifically talking about is whenever she and I first started settling in and becoming a happy little couple, she would, we would cook dinner and sit down and we'd want to watch a movie together. And
I
uh,
don't know why I even questioned what you were talking about. I should
yeah,
have known. Go ahead.
so she would be up and going and doing and, going to get laundry, folding laundry, and all this different
No,
stuff.
I'd be cleaning the kitchen so I could sit down and eat without thinking about having to go back to the
But then
kitchen.
after you
I
got
mean,
done
I did
cleaning
do
the
work, but
kitchen,
you're not wrong.
you would go and do other things.
Right.
I mean, there was never just one thing that you were finishing up and then you'd be in
ADHD.
there. And so all I wanted as a spouse was you to come and sit and be with me
Mhm.
for that 30 minutes to an hour while we're eating and watch a movie or whatever the situation was. And so that was really hard for me. And I just had to one day verbalize it and be like, hey, like, this is really what I'm wanting you to do. I really want you to just sit down and spend time with me because we don't have a lot of that together. And since then, that you really have, changed yourself to do that, at least for that time frame. So,
Right. We're all, I mean, we work together. I say work together. We started off in our relationship working together. And then there was like maybe a year and a half, 2 years that we didn't work together. But there would be times I would go to work with him. He would come up and see me at work, very rarely, but we spent as much time together. Like we
mhm.
I mean, we're each other's, I say best friend, and we'll get into that deeper, but like I like you.
Mhm.
I like being with you and you're fun. And so it makes it very easy to be around you. And I don't want to say I have a hard time being alone, but I'm just so used to, because I have, my youngest at 19, or 3 weeks after I turned 20, and I'd just been around people my whole life. I don't know anything other than to be with someone.
Mhm.
So then we got into a job situation, or where we're at in our careers, where we're both working in the same building.
Mhm.
There are projects that we collaborate on, and especially now. So we are very used to being around each other, but there's a difference between time and quality time. And
Yeah.
what he was asking for, again, was for me to just come sit down. And in my mind, I was just cleaning up the kitchen so I could eat dinner without having to think about, when I got done eating, going back in there and cleaning up behind myself. Could I have just asked him, hey, can we clean up along the way? We definitely have two different styles of cooking. Hey, can you come in here and before we sit down and eat, can we do this? Or any compromise in between. But when you did finally express to me, like, this is what I want, am I perfect at that? No. Did I try to come up with accommodations like, oh, well, I can see, like, we will watch a movie or something while we eat, I can see the TV from there. Go ahead and eat. And it wasn't until really you put your foot down and you're like, I'm not eating until you come in
Yeah.
here. And then I started feeling pressured. And at first that sounds like, it could sound very manipulative, but I think that for me, I needed to know that, like, this is important enough to me for you to come in there.
Mhm.
Have I gotten better at that? Yes. Is that a skill that I have mastered? No. And I also didn't understand what quality time meant. Again, we'll get into that. But it is important for me, because quality time is something that, like, you know, especially with my past, I'm not familiar with.
Mhm.
I'm very comfortable doing my own thing, getting sidetracked with my own thing, while I want you around. Like, you know, I'm just so used to not that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I had to work at that. That's something I continue to work on. And to your point, you talk about, with my primary love language being being words of affirmation, that's something very foreign to you, as foreign to me as it is to sit down and have dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we're just being real here, I'm not crying, I'm just itching my eye. If we're being real here, whether it is healthy or not, I think there's something to be said for the fact that there was a time I was like, especially after reading the book, hyper focused on words of affirmation. Like I felt like after you were armed with that knowledge and you had been watching other content, like that's all I could think about. Like, you know how to do this. Like when we first got together, puppy dog love will make you do things that are outside the norm. Some people believe that that never ends. Some people believe that that's just like, I never experienced puppy dog love or that initial love stage
Yeah.
until we got together. So for me, I was like, oh, he writes me love notes and he comes, does little things. And, at the time you were in the restaurant, like I still have the notes you would write on the styrofoam. And, you would send me texts like, good morning and I love you and all these things. And that was that lustful stage.
Yeah.
But when I really got to know you and when we really settled in and got comfortable, that was not who you were.
Yeah.
And I could not get around the fact that he had read the book. He had listened to all these podcasts that had given him the education, right? You had all the education that you needed to know that the way to make me feel loved in my language was to use words of affirmation.
Yeah.
And when you first read the book, I remember the first thing that you'd done after that book was call me one day and you were like, I just want you to know that you're beautiful and I love you. I was driving over the bridge and immediately I was like, what did he do? Like that was the reflex thought. Like what happened that he had to tell me that? I was waiting for the sucker punch and that was it. And then I rationalized that, he's been reading the book. He's putting this into play. And I do know that, like all things, you have to put effort in, but you growing up in a household that didn't have those words of affirmation and me growing up in a situation where not that I didn't have words of affirmation to some extent, but the fact that I was like always aiming to please and I always knew based on words where I wasn't measuring up. Like I just wanted to have those to know like, hey, you're enough. Hey, you're doing a good job. When other people would give me those words of affirmation, I would just cling to that. And so for me, I dote on you. And I know that's uncomfortable for you. And I've tried to work on that. Or I dote on the kids. And I will text somebody real quick and tell them I love them. And I've probably scared some people off. And I've had to recently, like in the last 3 months, tell somebody like, hey, when I really feel close to you, I'm going to tell you that I love you. And I hope that doesn't make you uncomfortable. And if it does, tell me.
Yeah.
But I say all this to say that whether it is healthy or not, where we're at now, which is why I want to take the quiz again, I recognize that with you, that was just a struggle. And I was so hyper focused on it that I felt like if you knew all this and didn't use it, then you really can't possibly love me. Right. I must be unlovable or I'm not doing something right. I would constantly be analyzing, like, what did I say that was wrong? What did I do that was wrong that he didn't use the tools that he had? This is a process. And this is like from the depths of your childhood, how you were raised, what you're comfortable with. You don't even like getting those words. It makes you feel just, I don't know how you feel inside, but uncomfortable is the word that you use. And I've tried to back off of telling you things. I can't help that I think he's the sexiest man alive. And now I'm going to make him feel uncomfortable on a podcast. I can't help that I think he's a great dad that, I love the way his sweat smells. Going back to the first episode, I can't help. They just like fall out of me, but I've had to learn, I don't want to make him feel uncomfortable. I want to love him how he wants to be loved. So my take on be bilingual is, maybe yes, words of affirmation is my thing, but I'm trying to speak yours. And somewhere along the way, and I don't know if this is normal. I don't know if it's for better, the better or worse. I don't really know where this falls, but it's like all of a sudden one day I woke up and like, I don't want to say that I don't care, but I just stopped thinking about it. Like, I knew that even though in my mind there were tools out there that to me were logical, like set a reminder on your phone, like you can schedule text. I didn't know you could do that. Like you can definitely automate. I love you. You're
I think
beautiful.
whenever so that is relatively new just for continuity, to iPhone. And whenever I first started utilizing it, and you're like kind of disheartened at the fact that I was like scheduling them out, and you verbalized that, and then you later on came back and was saying, "Oh no, never mind. Actually, that does mean something." I think in my head that just like switched it off. It was like, "Oh well, she doesn't like that thing," and I don't know why, and it's not an excuse on my part, but not but it's not an excuse on my part. That being said, something in my brain was just like, "Oh,
Oh, it's because you went out of your way. I'm assuming.
yeah,
I'm not a doctor. But I feel like you went out of your way. Like it takes time to do that.
yeah,
Like it takes time to say something like I got to sit down. Now I got to type these things out. Then I got to schedule it. Like,
yeah,
and for you, it wasn't comfortable to say those things to begin with.
mhm,
But now, especially as hectic as our life is, I took time out of my busy schedule to do this. And now she's saying, and what I was feeling at the time is like, if I could think back to it was, it's the easy button. Like I think about you all the time.
yeah." And it
And
doesn't lessen how I feel
yeah, for
in
sure.
that moment, and that me doing that gives me a few seconds to stop and think about what I'm trying to say and get them out, whether it's scheduled or not.
And you feel that, and to my understanding, you feel that way all the time. It's not
Yeah,
like you don't wake up and you're like, oh, that bitch is ugly today. I
yeah,
shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry. That she is not ugly today, or she's not pretty today,
yeah,
or whatever it is that, you have expressed that I love you all the time.
yeah,
And again, coming from a situation where I hadn't felt that ever, like
mhm,
when you said, oh, well, I was scheduling them out, I was very selfish in that thought because I didn't know how to process things
mhm,
and thought, well, you're having to like schedule a text to tell me that you think I'm beautiful. So I must be doing something wrong. And it
yeah,
became about me, not about him. And now looking back, like to me, if you scheduled them, great. Like I don't care that you scheduled them,
yeah,
but I can see why it would flip that switch. And conversely, when um you were doing it for a little bit and then you stopped, and in your mind you were articulating, especially with my new career path, like you really do give me positive words because you're directly involved with it and it's something very comfortable for you.
yeah,
But to you, you're giving me these words of affirmation, and even though they're not quite what I'm looking for or weren't quite what I was looking for, like you were trying your best
mhm,
with what you had. And I'd already like crapped on your other
yeah.
ways. So, excuse me.
Well,
Something died in me in that sense.
yeah. Can you list off the five love languages again for me?
Words of affirmation,
Mhm,
acts of service,
mhm,
quality time,
mhm.
physical touch, and gifts.
I think another thing for me, and this kind of plays into why it is easier for me to tell you, hey, you're doing a great job with work, is out of all of them, out of all the five love languages, um, unless it's a note, words of affirmation is intangible. Like that is the only one that I'm not physically doing something for you. Like if I'm giving you a gift, that's me physically going out of my way to make something or buy something for you. Acts of service, same kind of thing. All of them, all the other four are something tangible that I have in my hand that I'm giving to you or doing for you or fixing a problem that you had, which is something that most men, but I love to do. Um, So I think that might be another reason why words of affirmation was so hard, and why whenever I'm talking about work, it's easy because I'm physically watching you do your job, or physically there with you whenever you're doing your job. And I can say, oh wow, look, here's actual physical results as well from that, and be able to say, hey, you did a great job in that. That was a great situation that you're in. That was a great opportunity that you created for yourself. um, so I think that might be some reasons why maybe it's hard for me to do these things.
And this is why we do the podcast,
Yeah,
because
it's
I
therapy.
mean, we've never had this conversation before ever.
It just hit me.
Um, and is also why talking is so important.
Yeah.
And we haven't even gotten to the 5 love languages,
Mhm.
but I thought it was important to
Was that number
mention,
one? Number
to,
one on the list?
no, I just thought it was important to mention, like when it said be bilingual,
Hmm.
you made notes and you brought them to me.
Yeah.
And I definitely understood the being bilingual. Like, I need to speak your language and you should be speaking my language. But I do think it's important, if there's someone out there watching that, where maybe they're going through the same situation, or maybe they keep asking for the same thing
Hmm.
over and over, or feel like they need it. Um, and whether it is based in a, you know, maybe you have a hole, right? Your mom, dad didn't tell you that they loved you enough. People always verbally abused you. It wasn't until, for me, I can imagine that, due to some of my sexual trauma or emotional trauma, that anytime somebody said positive things about me, that I clung to that because I needed that. And because all of the other trauma was like, the antithesis of that. There was a space in there where that's all I could think about. He's
Sorry.
snapping at the dog. Anyway, um, you want to wait till he goes and then cut
No,
that?
you can go ahead. The camera's on you anyway.
Oh. Anyway, you're in our real life and we have a real dog and he's doing real things. um, we had the conversation the other night about this very same topic, and it came up because I'd said that, again, being hyper focused on it for a little bit.
Yep.
A lot of it, well, I guess by comparison, a little bit. But I woke up one day and I realized I didn't care if he told me he loved me anymore. Like, I care, but I don't care. I didn't care if he told me I was beautiful. I didn't care if he told me I was doing a good job. And there was a part of me that, when I put thought to it, worried that it had to do with some resentment that I was dealing with. There was a part of me that wondered, because of the position that I have, my job, that I get words of affirmation all day long. And I'm very thankful for that and very appreciative of that. And everyone who says something, I told myself I was not going to get emotional on this. Everyone who says something positive to me, they have no idea how much that means to me, because I do pour my soul, just like our marriage. I pour my soul into my job, because it's well beyond a job. It's like my life's mission. It's been something I've made a joke about, but for years have wanted to do, and now I'm doing it. And people see the hard work that I put in. And outside of that, and this is a tough topic for us, but it has come up. People approach me about my looks, and it's uncomfortable for me. I don't want those words of affirmation. That makes me feel very awkward. But when it comes from you, the person I want it to come from, much like when my work is out there and people appreciate my work, the same people that I'm putting it out there for, like, that means something to me. But it was very scary to think, like, I just don't care anymore. So I sat on it for a while, before I brought it up to you. And I still I still don't know if that's a positive or a negative, or if it's a neutral, or if it's growth, or if it's life. But there's a sense of relief
Hmm.
that that I'm not constantly waiting around for that.
Yeah.
And there's a sense of freedom in the fact that I don't independently as a person, because of how I've always been, that I don't need that from you.
Yeah.
But then there's also a part of me that worries, is that, resentment from other things that causes me to not care about that from you or not. But it is important for you to talk about each other's needs and talk about the things that you're doing to work on those.
Hmm.
And like at the time, had I realized, I guess, that you scheduling out the text was something that was the most comfortable for you, was a sign of love, was a sign of appreciation, was a sign of you putting in effort. Had I known that at the time, I wouldn't have taken it for granted.
Yeah.
And is it my fault that you have a hard time doing that and expressing that now, and you could have done it that way? Maybe it's something that it was easy for you to close off, and therefore not put any thought to, and that's something on you. Maybe it's a little of both. I don't
Hmm.
know. But when we talk about the first part, be bilingual and love languages, really hearing the person that you're with and really understanding how their mind works, and appreciating what you do have,
Yeah.
and knowing it's a journey. And if I'm trying to travel across the desert, it may take months, it may take a year, but appreciating every moment along the way, that is being bilingual.
Yeah. And also, the flip side to that is understanding that your person might not be able to be everything for you all the time. Like, as much as I want to be that sense of, um, uh, being able to do the words of affirmation for you all the time. And that's something that I struggle with whenever it gets brought up. Like, I struggle with it constantly, but specifically whenever it gets brought up, I'm like, oh, geez, like I'm just a terrible person. I'm a bad husband because of this. Um, I have to also realize, like, I do all these other things that shows her, and she expresses to me that I'm a good husband. So even if I'm messing up on this one thing, that doesn't make me a bad person. It just means that's something that I have to work on. And like I said, understanding, and you being, good enough to understand that, that's a struggle for me, and I'm not going to be able to be everything for you all the time. I think is very important for any couple. You know.
No, that's absolutely true. And I think there's two things at play. The first thing that when you said that I thought about was like, that this is going to come off like me being disrespectful or rude, but I don't mean for it to.
Mhm.
Like, your insecurity about being a bad person is not my responsibility. Like, you think that you're a bad person because you're not doing that. And
No, that's a
that,
total internal thought.
right. And I want to take ownership of that, because that's who I am,
Yeah.
who I have been as a person. Where he's feeling negatively, it's my job to fix it. Much like a man, like, is a fixer.
Yeah. And
Where
oh, go ahead.
where I'm not responsible for fixing you any more than you're responsible for making me feel loved every day, in that sense.
Yeah.
Like, I get that it's a process.
Yeah.
I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if, like, okay, so I do know that when it comes to acts of service, even recently, like gift giving, gift giving, like, you hit a home run. Like, I know I can count, if
Oh,
even if it's not even if it's not on my timeline, ladies, on our timeline. Like, there's so much satire about when you take out the trash, and then like 5 minutes have gone by, and then now we're taking out the trash angrily.
mhm.
Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, like, you know, that you will take care of things. I do not have to doubt. If I can randomly tell you, like, I wanted an art studio. And then like the next weekend I had an art studio where there may be something I'm like, oh, I want this. And it may take a little bit, a slow burn, but you get it. I don't ever have to worry about you being taken care of.
Yeah.
I don't
Hey, boy.
ever have to worry about,
Paper towel. Sorry.
I don't ever have to worry about, quality time. Like I know that you're my like ride or die, like in a literal sense. Like
Yeah.
you will go with me wherever for the most part. And we can spend
Depends on how
quality.
social it is.
Exactly. And unless there's a exterior challenge to it, that you will spend whatever quality time we want to. It's hard when you have kids, but
Yeah.
I know that you've got me in that sense. When it comes to the words of affirmation, you expressed a concern about love bombing me, where like let's say you really put like this maximum effort, right? Like Deb pulled it up, and you started doing these things all the time, and you and I are both really good, I'm going to use positive words, about hyper focusing on things, and then you dropped off of it. Your concern was because I had such a, from your perspective, a hole that needed to be filled, that if you started filling that and then all of a sudden like it stopped or slowed down, that I would then have an expectation of, no, you've already done that, you should do that. And I did do that when it came to the like comparing the beginning of our relationship to now, but or that you would be a letdown in some way.
Yeah. I raised the
Right.
bar myself.
Right. And I think for you, part of that is your own insecurities about not being good enough. And then second to that, that, I don't think you should ever love bomb someone, and you should really work on it at a pace that's comfortable for you. But you were making, and I remember thinking about it at the time, you were making assumptions for me that may or may not have been true.
It wasn't assumptions. It was a fact that I was reading this book. I was hyper focused on it, and I was going to overdo it. And then I would have sprinted instead of, did the marathon. And that would have been disappointing. I wasn't basing my assumption off of you. I was basing it off of me and how I would have disappointed you. Absolutely. If I would have done it to the extent of what my mind was doing at the time, where I was reading the five love languages, and I was on the chapter about words of affirmation. So it was all right there forefront of my head. So if I would have delved into it, like sat there and did everything that I did or would have done during that time frame, a few months later, whenever I'm on the next book, the next podcast, the next thing, and I slowed down or almost come to a halt, you would have been like, what the hell? Where's this at? Where'd it go? And that's a me problem, not a you thing. And I'm glad that I didn't do that. And that gives me the opportunity to create the drip instead of the waterfall and then nothing.
Right. I think the conversation, and yes, I totally understand that. I think the conversation I was referring to was just even a couple nights ago, because you had concern about if you were to enact that's what would happen. But I feel like and I did share with you in the beginning of you doing this, that was a fear of mine, that you would get into this book, you would hyper focus on it, it would be really, really good. Like, it would be everything that we both ever wanted. And then you would be on to the next thing, and maybe it was an anime, maybe it
Yeah.
was a project, maybe you were, got into a spiritual belief, maybe you got into like a series, and that's just how both of our minds kind of work. And then you would not have put as much effort into it, and therefore I would have been disappointed. But I think about the most recent conversation, where I think what I have always asked you in a lot of things is like, and this is why we do the podcast and why it's so important, at least to me. And I've shared that with you, where it's not that moment of tension. It's not that moment of, some situation has triggered us to have this conversation. But we are coming here to have a conversation in hopes of helping other people, and allows us the not high intensity to have that talk. But my question had always been, what does that mean? Like when you say that you're working on words of affirmation, what does that mean? I'm not asking you to answer that now. I'm just saying for other people who might be out there watching this, like, let's say it was March of this year. So, 6 months ago. I don't know if I mathed that right. No. Well,
Anyway.
6 months ago that was right though. 6 months ago that you read this book, and at the time, like, you recognized it, you were working on it. I understand that, the scheduling of the text, which was probably the most comfortable for you because it was that removal of, direct contact.
No, it's on removal of direct contact. It was, again, me being able to sit down and focus on what I wanted to say to you, and be able to get it all out at once, but have it do that healthy drip aspect of it.
Right. That makes sense. So then we're looking at then, and so 6 months have gone by. The transition has happened where you've gotten into other hyper focuses along the way. I do the same thing.
To be fair, there have been a lot of things that I have taken from this book. Maybe not specifically the words of affirmation, but there's a lot of things that I've taken from that book that I still utilize every single day, especially whenever we're in arguments.
Oh, I do not by any means. I want to be very specific with those of you watching, and with you, because that's not at all what I'm saying. We're just talking about the topic of, and I'm not thinking that you said that because you don't understand where I'm at. I think you're just giving a disclaimer.
Yeah, because the way that you're talking is like, it's like I got hyperfixated on this and then dropped everything.
No, I'm just talking in the general. We were supposed to go over like 4 bullet points here, but we got stuck on the being bilingual. But that's what we're here for, right? You having been already in the book, right? And you've already read this section, you've already, processed it, you've already moved on in that sense. And so the question I asked you based on a total different conversation that actually brought out to light the fact that I felt like words of affirmation was dead. And I wanted that. Like, especially when you were having a hard time with it, probably based on when that shut down on you. Like, I wanted to no longer care about that. I did not know that that was really what I wanted, but it was so much easier. It was so much easier to not be who I was, to be with you, than to be who I was and be disappointed. Not that you're disappointing, not that you don't do other things, not that you haven't taken things, not that we haven't grown, but a love language, the way that I have felt loved from the beginning of time, whether inflamed or not by trauma. I just wanted it to go away because it would hurt way less than to be disappointed.
No.
It would hurt way less than to wonder what you were saying, which was, I'm trying. And I would always ask you, like, what does that mean? Like, what does I'm trying mean? Does
Again,
I'm trying
back to the intangible aspect of, you are probably going to see our dog, but the intangible part of words of affirmation, where it's easy for you to look around and see all the projects that I've done for you, or look around and see, oh, I pick up the kids every single day, and see, oh, that's me taking something off of your plate so you can do what you need to do in your life.
and you enjoy that.
I do enjoy that, but there's still aspects of it. Hold on, I might have to move him out of here if he gets too excited. But I mean, there's other things like that, like picking up medicines or whatever the situation may be.
Acts of service.
Yeah, those are so much easier to look at and be like, oh, that happened because I have a physical product or I have a thing that is done for me. Where, again, words of affirmation, it's so hard to be like, to recount, because both of our memories are bad, to recount like, oh, well, I said this to you earlier today, And it may have not have been this, hey, you're beautiful aspect, but it could have been like, oh, dinner was good, or, little things like that, that maybe have been skipped over because I got interrupted, or a dog walked through, or a kid came in
That
and
was a
said
great
something.
example.
Um, so, there's that part of it too, where it's like, it's not a physical thing that you can see or act, or it's almost like, it's like air. It's like, you don't realize it's there until the wind blows.
Right.
So, if it's a little tiny breeze, you might not notice it. But if a gust of wind hits you, then you're gonna hey, that hit me,
Right.
and it's kind of the same thing, you know.
Right. Um, and I get that. And again, I think it's that, and we've talked, I think a few times about this, that like, it's not for me with the words of affirmation. Like I do know there's no shadow of a doubt for me that, and this goes back to being bilingual. Like I have had to learn to speak acts of service, because if I don't, and I only fixate on my love language,
Mhm.
I'm going to be hurting. I'm going to be starved. I'm going to be upset. Just like you, quality time. Like you have had to come to a place in your life where like you just accept the fact that, you know, my wife is ADHD
Mhm.
and, or has a really hard time doing this. Does she do it sometimes? Yes. Does she, can you guarantee once a week that I'm going to come sit down and do that for you? Yes. Does that mean it's going to be consistent? No. Does that mean that it's not going to be twice a week? Yeah, that goes back to consistent. But you know that it is a chore, therefore you have accepted me where I'm at.
Mhm.
And that is, as far as I'm concerned, like, I think it's two kind of situations where, one, you've taken a love language that I am working on and trying to accept it how it is, where I'm taking another love language that you are good at it and accepting that as replacement or
Supplement.
supplementation,
Yep.
right? And you may be asking yourself, going back to what I was just saying, that, well, what does working on it mean? You know, I'm looking for, and what I guess I crave when it comes to the primary language is, you complimenting my acts of service, me cooking dinner. I hate being in the kitchen. I hate it. It is like a life suck. It is a struggle. It is
Here we go, guys.
confusing. Oh, you know,
Yeah. Boy, go lay down for a minute. Yeah. Go lay down. Go lay down. Good boy.
unless you put him in a kid room, he's gonna
He's all right.
very
He's
likely
good.
keep standing there.
He's okay. Go
I'll
ahead.
pick up for a minute. So like me cooking dinner, being in the kitchen is like an immense struggle. And when you compliment the dinner that I made, I don't give a shit if you like it.
Mhm.
Like I just, if you ate it and it worked and I did that, good for me.
Mhm.
It was like, again, back to the maximum effort. Like it took everything in me. That was my gift of quality time to you, that
Yep.
I cooked dinner. And it may not have been with you. Often I will cook dinner alone, in the kitchen alone. We all sometimes, you go through that sometimes, but that was my active service and my quality time. Like I was in the
I
kitchen.
think it's fair for me to say dinner for both of us is not enjoyable at this point. Unless it's just you and I on the weekends, it's just us cooking for us,
Right.
which normally we don't do. It's much better for us if we just go out. I think,
Or don't eat.
yeah, I think if it's fair for me to say both of us are miserable during that time. We don't really want to be doing it. And we don't really care if we get compliments on, like, I don't care if you compliment my food. I just want you to eat,
Right.
and I think you probably feel the same way.
Right. And so, for
That one,
you,
so that one is off the table. It doesn't count.
right. But for you, when you tell me I did a good job cooking dinner, you're thinking you're giving me words of affirmation, and I don't care if you like dinner.
Yep.
Like, unless I ask you specifically, like, an example tonight where I know you are the culinary expert in the house because that's your background. I bought something you told me specifically before we even got home, we're not cooking. But I had a craving. I wanted to make that. You needed food. You didn't want to cook. I knew you were going to go plunder in there. So I was like, all right, well, I'm getting this because I want it. I'm going to figure out how to cook it. You even gave me your input. And I was like, I appreciate that, but if I'm gonna mess this up, this is the food that I wanted, right? I don't care if I mess it up. And it was, the first one was okay. The second was really good. Like, I felt like I hit a home run, and that's what you got served. You got served the one that I would have eaten. I ate the lesser. That was
That was good.
a sacrifice for me. But you complimenting the dinner that I didn't want to cook to begin with. What I'd much rather hear is, I see that you got in that kitchen and you did something you hate doing.
Yep.
And did it take 2 hours where it should have only taken 30 minutes? Maybe. But you did that. I appreciate that. Or thank you. I saw that it was a mental and time load on you and you did it anyway. So, I think I keep going back around to, I'm working on it. What does that mean? If you're sitting down and having these conversations, like, I understand what it means to be working on something. And this is the point where, and I don't think we've ever done this, where I should be able to say, like, I hear that you're working on it. You are doing a great job where you're at. You don't want to say to somebody you're missing the mark, but, like, this is really what would be meaningful to me.
No.
This is where you could work on that, however that looks. If you got to schedule it, if you got to, set a reminder, if you had to do a voice recording and send it later, if you only do it once a week, there are apps out there for those of you who work that way and your brain works that way, where you can have reminders and it challenges you once a week. We can link it down below for those people it might be beneficial to. Write a sticky note. You can write like 7 of those at a time. When I write a sticky note and that's 7 of those at a time, like, that is meant for one instance, not for multiple, but nonetheless, but you do have to be aware that for both parties, like, there's a level of acceptance and there may be a level of watching your person change and you having to work through that. So again, I still don't know where I stand on words of affirmation. I clearly, obviously enjoy them, but I haven't once thought about the fact that I care if you think that you say it to me. But knowing where you stand in all of this and how we're both making sacrifices to be bilingual is important, because then at least it gives that opportunity for grace and understanding. And it's not you trying to do your own thing and me trying to do my own thing with the same information.
Yep.
It is us coming together and having a dialogue. And when we have that dialogue, those aha moments can happen. Even if it means that I might walk away, you walk away feeling inadequate, I walk away feeling inadequate, that only happens if we're not knowing that we're in a space right now where we're just sharing thoughts and loving each other right where we're at.
Yeah.
That was a very long dialogue about being bilingual and love language.
Yep.
But
So I think that I'm going to call that one for tonight, because the other one will be kind of lost in translation at this point if we continue. So I think that was good, though. I think that was a good conversation, needed. I think we both got things worked out in that one. So what?
I was just thinking about how
You got him excited. Look at him. He thought you were talking to him.
I'm just thinking about how important it is to have these dialogues and how much I wanted to do this podcast.
Yep.
And it was really your idea to begin with. We're just being honest here. I got way more comfortable with the idea after spending time in the arena that I'm in, but it was something that you came up with, and I realized that in doing that, in doing this, that
Mm-hmm.
we are giving ourselves the opportunity to do something that we don't get to do.
Yep.
And I encourage you at home, please, even if you don't use a book, like, just talk.
Yep.
Have communication, and don't do it when you're angry. Don't do it when you're at the height of emotions. Write it down. I mean, again, this is like 6 months old at least, and you can go back to it and you can reference it, and you're going to grow and you're going to change.
Yep.
But you can't do anything without A, knowing yourself, and B, knowing one another without any judgment or negative narrative or negative undertones. Like, I don't think anything that we said here was negative toward the other person or defensive. I feel like it was just us talking. I walk away feeling closer to you. You walk away feeling closer to me. And hopefully you guys walk away inspired, or maybe you walk away and you're like, what is wrong with these people?
Oh my goodness.
And that's okay too.
Another thing is, make it like homework, like a fun homework situation where.
Homework is not fun though.
Okay, well,
I'm just
I'm gonna
kidding.
make it.
Sorry.
Make it a fun homework situation where it's like, okay, we're both gonna. I'm gonna send this podcast over to Lara, or I'm gonna buy this audiobook. I'm gonna send it over to Lara, and we're gonna listen to this. You know, you're gonna listen to it during your time, and I'm gonna listen to it during my time, almost like a book club kind of situation.
Or challenge,
And
or if
yeah,
you're competitive.
yeah, okay, I'm gonna read chapter one, you read chapter one, see who can come up with the best notes, and then come together and talk about those notes together.
And you may not be there in your relation. You may not be in a relationship at all. This is good for you as a person.
Yeah.
It may be hard and it may be out of context, but just having these independent thoughts, and maybe it's not about being bilingual, but that can prepare you for the future. Like, you're going to be with a person who is, I hope for your sake, not just like you, because I'd never want to be with me.
Goodness.
But
They might like themselves.
maybe. Good for you. You can give me a podcast. Share me your podcast. I want to watch you, because I need to understand like how that works, that level of comfort, and what has to happen. But not that I don't like myself. I'm just saying I would have been really happy doing that
I was
way
waiting
long.
for you to catch on to that.
Way earlier, many, many moons ago. But let's say you're in a relationship where you're not there. And I know I've been there. You have said you've been there. I think that watching this stuff, doing the challenge, offering it to your spouse, and even if they decline,
Hmm.
like, do it with the homework alone.
Yep.
Like,
And don't, and I'm going to reiterate this throughout the life of our
not homework,
podcast.
challenge,
Yeah.
conversation topic. Oh no, I'm anti-homework today.
Don't send our clips, our podcast, our information to your spouse out of spite, because that will never get you anywhere. I don't think Lara and I have ever done that I can think of, but I've heard on other podcasts where people have done that, and it's kind
It's
of like,
validation.
yeah, it's a validation, but whenever they took it out of context, especially with clips, and sent it to their spouse, it's like, just as an example, they're justifying like having an open relationship, which the people that I'm talking about definitely do not do that, but somehow they twisted it and sent it to their spouse in that kind of context. And please don't do that. Like, that's dirty. Like, you're manipulating your spouse. Don't do that. So yeah, make it a fun thing, make it something interesting for the both of you guys. Make it like the what is it, the freaking wing challenge on YouTube, where you're interviewing each other. Take our information that we have, create a five questionnaire thing, like 5 question thing, and do a one chip challenge, or have fun
Do
with it.
not do the one chip challenge.
Yeah.
Do not put a disclaimer down below. Please do not do the one chip challenge.
But yeah, go
That
ahead.
was a good date night though. Like,
Yeah.
we got, again, hyperfixation. We would ebb and flow on different things, but we have taken a podcast and he sent it to me, or I've sent it to him, and I would say, I really want you to watch this, and I want to come back later. And it may be a week, it may be 2 weeks. I might forget about it. Who knows? But
Mhm.
I really want to talk about this because something at that time struck me.
Mhm.
And there have been times where we had like a hour episode of something and we must have paused it. I don't know how many times, didn't make it through the whole episode, but it was a conversation point. And there may be one topic you might be in the very beginning that's super heavy and you don't get past that, but
Yep.
you're talking.
Yep.
You're doing
I
that.
mean, there's so many times where we'll send each other clips, and that's all it takes to 1 minute clip will send us into an hour-long dialogue, just like this, where we read one thing and now here we are, X amount of minutes into it. So I think we're gonna end it there. Don't forget, send emails. You know, let us help you out. Let us go over your situation and help you out if we can. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Thank you, everybody.